most well-known site, the first site to be discovered was Harappa. The settlement is divided into two sections, one smaller but higher and the other much larger. But figure 1.7 layout of Mohenjo-daro. How is the lower town different from the citadel?
Figure 1.7 summary. The figure is a map illustrating the layout of Mohenjo-daro, an urban center of the Harappan civilization. The map delineates two primary sections, the citadel, which is smaller and elevated, and the lower town, which is significantly larger. The citadel contains areas like the REM area, SD area, L area, and ACC area, while the lower town is divided into areas such as DKG northern and southern sections, DKB area, DKC area, Monir area, VZ and B areas, and HRA and B areas along with the GFD area. The layout suggests a planned urban design with distinct functional areas. The citadel, due to its smaller size and elevation, likely served administrative or ritualistic purposes, while the lower town, being more expansive, probably accommodated a larger residential population and various economic activities.
The plight of Harappa. Although Harappa was the first site to be discovered, it was badly destroyed by brick robbers. As early as 1875, Alexander Cunningham, the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, often called the father of Indian archaeology, noted that the amount of brick taken from the ancient site was enough to lay bricks for about 100 miles of the railway line between Lahore and Multan. Thus, many of the ancient structures at the site were damaged. In contrast, Mohenjo-daro was far better preserved. Lower. Archaeologists designate these as the citadel and the lower town respectively. The citadel owes its height to the fact that buildings were constructed on mud brick platforms. It was walled, which meant that it was physically separated from the lower town.
Image summary. The image shows a photograph of a drainage system. The photograph depicts a tunnel-like structure made of bricks, possibly an ancient drainage system. Based on the image, it can be inferred that the civilization that constructed this drainage system had advanced engineering skills and a good understanding of sanitation. The presence of such a well-built drainage system suggests a planned urban layout and a focus on public health.
The lower town was also walled. Several buildings were built on platforms, which served as foundations. It has been calculated that if one laborer moved roughly a cubic meter of earth daily, just to put the foundations in place, it would have required 4 million person days. In other words, mobilizing labor on a very large scale. Consider something else. Once the platforms were in place, all building activity within the city was restricted to a fixed area on the platforms. So it seems that the settlement was first planned and then implemented accordingly. Other signs of planning include bricks, which, whether sun-dried or baked, were of a standardized ratio, where the length and breadth were 4 times and twice the height respectively. Such bricks were used at all Harappan settlements. 3.1 Laying out drains. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the carefully planned drainage system. If you look at the plan of the lower town, you will notice that roads and streets were laid out along an approximate grid pattern, intersecting at right angles. It seems that streets with drains were laid out first, and then houses built along them. If domestic wastewater had to flow into the street drains, every house needed to have at least one wall along a street. Citadels. While most Harappan settlements have a small high western part and a larger lower eastern section, there are variations. At sites such as Dhalavira and Lothal, Gujarat, the entire settlement was fortified, and sections within the town were also separated by walls. The citadel within Lothal was not walled off, but was built at a height. 3.2 Domestic architecture. The lower town at Mohenjo-daro provides examples of residential buildings. Many were centered on a courtyard, with rooms on all sides. The courtyard was probably the center of activities such as cooking and weaving, particularly during hot and dry weather. What is also interesting is an apparent concern for privacy. There are no windows in the walls along the ground level. Besides, the main entrance does not give a direct view of the interior or the courtyard. Every house had its own bathroom paved with bricks, with drains connected through the wall to the street drains. Some houses have remains of staircases to reach a second story or the roof. Many houses had wells, often in a room that could be reached from the outside and perhaps used by passers-by. Scholars have estimated that the total number of wells in Mohenjo-Daro was about 700.
Figure 1.9 Summary. The figure is an isometric drawing of a large house in Mohenjo-Daro. The drawing depicts the layout and structure of the house, showcasing various rooms, courtyards, staircases, and other architectural features. The house appears to be well-planned and substantially constructed, with multiple rooms and a complex layout. The presence of staircases suggests the existence of upper levels or access to the roof. The overall impression is that of a relatively affluent and well-designed dwelling, indicative of the urban planning and architectural capabilities of the civilization.
The most ancient system yet discovered.
About the drains, Mackey noted, "It is certainly the most complete ancient system as yet discovered. Every house was connected to the street drains. The main channels were made of bricks set in mortar and were covered with loose bricks that could be removed for cleaning. In some cases, limestone was used for the covers. House drains first emptied into a sump or cesspit into which solid matter settled, while waste water flowed out into the street drains. Very long drainage channels were provided at intervals with sumps for cleaning. It is a wonder of archaeology that little heaps of material, mostly sand, have frequently been found lying alongside drainage channels, which shows that the debris was not always carted away when the drain was cleared."
Drainage systems were not unique to the larger cities, but were found in smaller settlements as well. At Lothal, for example, while houses were built of mud bricks, drains were made of burnt bricks. Discuss which of the architectural features of Mohenjo-Daro indicate planning.
Figure 1.1 Summary. The figure is a plan of the citadel. The plan showcases the layout and structural organization of the citadel, including various features such as a warehouse, great bath, college, pillared hall, and other sections and areas. The citadel appears to be a planned and structured settlement with distinct functional areas. The presence of features like the great bath and pillared hall suggests the potential for public or communal activities. The layout indicates a degree of urban planning and resource management.
3.3 The Citadel. It is on the citadel that we find evidence of structures that were probably used for special public purposes. These include the warehouse, a massive structure of which the lower brick portions remain, while the upper portions, probably of wood, decayed long ago, and the Great Bath. The Great Bath was a large rectangular tank in a courtyard surrounded by a corridor on all four sides. There were 2 flights of steps on the north and south leading into the tank, which was made watertight by setting bricks on edge and using a mortar of gypsum. There were rooms on 3 sides, in one of which was a large well. Water from the tank flowed into a huge drain. Across a lane to the north lay a smaller building with 8 bathrooms, 4 on each side of a corridor, with drains from each bathroom connecting to a drain that ran along the corridor. The uniqueness of the structure, as well as the context in which it was found, the citadel, with several distinctive buildings, has led scholars to suggest that it was meant for some kind of a special ritual bath. Ballot box with check, are there other structures on the citadel apart from the warehouse and the Great Bath? 4. Tracking social differences. 4.1 Burials. Archaeologists generally use certain strategies to find out whether there were social or economic differences amongst people living within a particular culture. These include studying burials. You are probably familiar with the massive pyramids of Egypt, some of which were contemporaneous with the Harappan civilization. Many of these pyramids were royal burials, where enormous quantities of wealth was buried. At burials in Harappan, sites the dead were generally laid in pits. Sometimes, there were differences in the way the burial pit was made. In some instances, the hollowed-out spaces were lined with bricks. Could these variations be an indication of social differences? We are not sure. Some graves contain pottery and ornaments, perhaps indicating a belief that these could be used in the afterlife. Jewelry has been found in burials of both men and women. In fact, in the excavations at the cemetery in Harappa in the mid-1980s, an ornament consisting of 3 shell rings, a jasper, a kind of semi-precious stone bead, and hundreds of microbeads was found near the skull of a male. In some instances, the dead were buried with copper mirrors. But on the whole, it appears that the Harappans did not believe in burying precious things with the dead. 4.2. Looking for luxuries. Another strategy to identify social differences is to study artifacts, which archaeologists broadly classify as utilitarian and luxuries. The first category includes objects of daily use made fairly easily out of ordinary materials such as stone or clay. These include querns, pottery, needles, flesh rubbers, body scrubbers, etc., and are usually found distributed throughout settlements. Archaeologists assume objects were luxuries if they are rare or made from costly, non-local materials or with complicated technologies. Thus, little pots of faience, a material made of ground sand or silica mixed with color and a gum and then fired, were probably considered precious because they were difficult to make. The situation becomes more complicated when we find what seem to be articles of daily hoards are objects kept carefully by people, often inside containers such as pots. Such hoards can be of jewelry or metal objects saved for reuse by metalworkers. If for some reason the original owners do not retrieve them, they remain where they are left till some archaeologist finds them.
Figure 1.11 Summary. This is a photograph of a copper mirror. The mirror is an artifact found at a burial site. The artifact suggests that the civilization did not believe in burying precious things with the dead. Figure 1.12 Summary. The figure displays a photograph of a faience pot. The pot is a small, ancient artifact, likely of significant historical value. The presence of such a pot in archaeological findings suggests the existence of craft specialization and potentially social stratification, as faience items were more difficult to produce and thus considered precious.
Discuss. What are the modes of disposal of the dead prevalent at present? To what extent do these represent social differences? Use, such as spindle whorls made of rare materials such as faience. Do we classify these as utilitarian or luxuries? If we study the distribution of such artifacts, we find that rare objects made of valuable materials are generally concentrated in large settlements like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and are rarely found in the smaller settlements. For example, miniature pots of faience, perhaps used as perfume bottles, are found mostly in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and there are none from small settlements like Kalibangan. Gold too was rare, and as at present, probably precious. All the gold jewelry found at Harappan sites was recovered from hoards. 5. Finding out about craft production. Locate ncert on Map 1. This is a tiny settlement, less than 7 hectares, as compared to Mohenjo-daro, 125 hectares, almost exclusively devoted to craft production, including bead making, shell cutting, metal working, seal making, and weight making. The variety of materials used to make beads is remarkable. Stones like carnelian of a beautiful red color, jasper, crystal, quartz, and steatite, metals like copper, bronze, and gold, and shell, faience, and terracotta or burnt clay. Some beads were made of 2 or more stones, cemented together, some of stone with gold caps. The shapes were numerous, disc-shaped, cylindrical, spherical, barrel-shaped, segmented. Some were decorated by incising or painting, and some had designs etched onto them. Techniques for making beads differed according to the material. Steatite, a very soft stone, was easily worked. Some beads were molded out of a paste made with steatite powder. This permitted making a variety of shapes, unlike the geometrical forms made out of harder stones. How the steatite micro bead was made remains a puzzle for archaeologists studying ancient technology. Archaeologists' experiments have revealed that the red color of carnelian was obtained by firing the yellowish raw material and beads at various stages of production. Nodules were chipped into rough shapes and then finely flaked into the final form. Grinding, polishing, and drilling completed the process. Specialized drills have been found at ncert, Lothal, and more recently at Dalavira. If you locate Nadeshwar and Balakot on Map 1, you will notice that both settlements are near the coast. These were specialized centers for making shell objects, including bangles, ladles, and inlay, which were taken to other settlements. Similarly, it is likely that finished products, such as beads, from ncert and Lothal, were taken to the large urban centers such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa.
Figure 1.13 Summary. The figure contains two images, one of a tool and the other of beads. The tool appears to be pointed at one end. The beads are in the form of a necklace and some individual beads. The figure suggests the variety of materials and objects used in ancient times, including tools and decorative items like beads.
5.1 Identifying centers of production. In order to identify centers of craft production, archaeologists usually look for the following: raw materials such as stone nodules, whole shells, copper ore, tools, unfinished objects, rejects, and waste material. In fact, waste is one of the best indicators of craftwork. For instance, if shell or stone is cut to make objects, then pieces of these materials will be discarded as waste at the place of production. Fig. 1.15 A terracotta figurine. Sometimes, larger waste pieces were used up to make smaller objects, but minuscule bits were usually left in the work area. These traces suggest that, apart from small, specialized centers, craft production was also undertaken in large cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa.
Figure 1.15 Summary. The figure shows an image of a terracotta figurine. The figurine appears to be a representation of a deity or a significant female figure, adorned with what seems to be a headdress and some form of neck ornamentation. The figure's construction suggests a level of artistic skill and cultural symbolism. The existence of such figurines indicates the presence of artistic expression and potentially religious or social practices in the culture from which it originates. Figure 1.16 Summary. The figure shows an image of copper and bronze vessels. The image displays an ancient pot and a plate, showcasing the craftsmanship of the era. Based on the presence of these vessels, it can be inferred that copper and bronze were utilized for crafting containers and other objects, indicating a certain level of metallurgical skill and resource availability in that time.
6 Strategies for procuring materials. As is obvious, a variety of materials was used for craft production. While some such as clay were locally available, many such as stone, timber, and metal had to be procured from outside the alluvial plain. Terracotta toy models of bullock carts suggest that this was one important means of transporting goods and people across land routes. Riverine routes along the Indus and its tributaries, as well as coastal routes, were also probably used. 6.1 Materials from the subcontinent and beyond. The Harappans procured materials for craft production in various ways. For instance, they established settlements such as Nadeshwar and Balakot in areas where shell was available. Other such sites were Shordakai, in far-off Afghanistan, near the best source of lapis lazuli, a blue stone that was apparently very highly valued, and Lothal, which was near sources of carnelian, from Bharuch in Gujarat, steatite, from South Rajasthan and North Gujarat, and metal, from Rajasthan. Another strategy for procuring raw materials may have been to send expeditions to areas such as the Khetri region of Rajasthan, for copper, and South India, for gold. These expeditions established communication with local communities. Occasional finds of Harappan artifacts, such as steatite micro-beads in these areas, are indications of such contact. There is evidence in the Khetri area for what archaeologists call the Gaineshwar Jodhpur culture, with its distinctive non-Harappan pottery and an unusual wealth of copper objects. It is possible that the inhabitants of this region supplied copper to the Harappans.
Image Summary. The image is a map. The map depicts the Harappan civilization and West Asia. The map shows the geographical locations of Mesopotamia, Dilmun, Magan, Meluha, and Turan, along with some cities. The relative locations of the civilizations and cities suggest potential trade routes and interactions between them.
6.2 Contact with distant lands. Recent archaeological finds suggest that copper was also probably brought from Oman, on the southeastern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. Chemical analyses have shown that both the Omani copper and Harappan artifacts have traces of nickel, suggesting a common origin. There are other traces of contact as well. A distinctive type of vessel, a large Harappan jar coated with a thick layer of black clay, has been found at Omani sites. Such thick coatings prevent the percolation of liquids. We do not know what was carried in these vessels, but it is possible that the Harappans exchanged the contents of these vessels for Omani copper. Mesopotamian texts datable to the 3rd millennium BCE refer to copper coming from a region called Magan, perhaps a name for Oman, and interestingly enough, copper found at Mesopotamian sites also contains traces of nickel. Other archaeological finds suggestive of long-distance contacts include Harappan seals, weights, dice, and beads. In this context, it is worth noting that Mesopotamian texts mention contact with regions named Dilmun, probably the island of Bahrain, Magan, and Meluha, possibly the Harappan region. They mention the products from Meluha: carnelian, lapis lazuli, copper, gold, and varieties of wood. A Mesopotamian myth says of Meluha, "May your bird be the Haja bird, may its call be heard in the royal palace." Some archaeologists think the Haja bird was the peacock. Did it get this name from its call? It is likely that communication with Oman, Bahrain, or Mesopotamia was by sea. Mesopotamian texts refer to Meluha as a land of seafarers. Besides, we find depictions of ships and boats on seals. Hangul Kagia, Inus.
Figure 1.17 summary. The figure shows an image of a Harappan jar found in Oman. The jar is a large vessel with a distinctive shape and a thick coating of black clay. The presence of Harappan jars in Oman suggests contact and trade between the Harappan civilization and Oman. It is possible that the contents of these vessels were exchanged for Omani copper. Figure 1.18 summary. The figure displays a cylinder seal. The seal contains a motif of a humped bull. It is likely that the motif on the seal is derived from the Indus region. The seal provides evidence of cultural exchange and influence between different regions. Figure 1.19 summary. This figure shows an image of a round Persian Gulf seal. The seal was discovered in Bahrain. The seal contains local Dilmun motifs. It appears that the seal's motifs followed the Harappan standard. This suggests there was a cultural exchange between Dilmun and the Harappan civilization. This indicates that the Harappan civilization had influence in the Dilmun region. Figure 1.2 summary. The figure shows an image of a seal. The seal appears to depict a boat. This suggests that the people of that time might have been seafarers and used boats for transportation or trade.
7 seals, script, weights. 7.1 Seals and sealings. Seals and sealings were used to facilitate long-distance communication. Imagine a bag of goods being sent from one place to another. Its mouth was tied with rope, and on the knot was affixed some wet clay on which one or more seals were pressed, leaving an impression. If the bag reached with its sealing intact, it meant that it had not been tampered with. The sealing also conveyed the identity of the sender. 7.2 An enigmatic script. Harappan seals usually have a line of writing, probably containing the name and title of the owner. Scholars have also suggested that the motif, generally an animal, conveyed a meaning to those who could not read. Most inscriptions are short, the longest containing about 26 signs. Although the script remains undeciphered to date, it was evidently not alphabetical, where each sign stands for a vowel or a consonant, as it has just too many signs, somewhere between 375 and 400. It is apparent that the script was written from right to left, as some seals show a wider spacing on the right and cramping on the left, as if the engraver began working from the right and then ran out of space. Consider the variety of objects on which writing has been found. Seals, copper tools, rims of jars, copper and terracotta tablets, jewelry, bone rods, even an ancient signboard. Remember, there may have been writing on perishable materials too. Could this mean that literacy was widespread? 7.3 Weights. Exchanges were regulated by a precise system of weights, usually made of a stone called ncert and generally cubical fig. 1.2 With no markings. The
Figure 1.22 summary. The figure shows an image of a ceiling. The ceiling contains writing and an animal motif. The ceiling is from a location called Rapar. The presence of writing on the ceiling indicates a system of communication or record-keeping. The animal motif may have conveyed a meaning or identity associated with the owner of the seal.
Discuss. What are some of the present-day methods used for long-distance exchange of goods? What are their advantages and problems? Lower denominations of weights were binary, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, while the higher denominations followed the decimal system, 160, 200, 320, 640. The smaller weights were probably used for weighing jewelry and beads. Metal scale pans have also been found.
Figure 1.23 summary. The figure is a photographic depiction of a stone sculpture. The sculpture appears to be a bust of a man, identified as a priest king. The sculpture shows the man with a beard and a headband. The sculpture is damaged. The sculpture suggests the existence of hierarchical structures or specialized roles within the society from which it originates.
8. Ancient authority. There are indications of complex decisions being taken and implemented in Harappan society. Take, for instance, the extraordinary uniformity of Harappan artifacts is evident in pottery Fig. 1.14, seals, weights, and bricks. Notably, bricks, though obviously not produced in any single center, were of a uniform ratio throughout the region, from Jammu to Gujarat. We have also seen that settlements were strategically set up in specific locations for various reasons. Besides, labor was mobilized for making bricks and for the construction of massive walls and platforms.
Figure 1.14 summary. The figure is a collection of pottery. The pottery consists of various sizes and shapes of pots and containers. The pottery seems to be ancient and made of a reddish material. The pottery shows that ancient civilizations were capable of creating diverse and functional items from natural resources. The existence of different forms may indicate different purposes or cultural influences.
Who organized these activities? 8.1 Palaces and kings. If we look for a center of power, or for depictions of people in power, archaeological records provide no immediate answers. A large building found at Mohenjo-daro was labeled as a palace by archaeologists, but no spectacular finds were associated with it. A stone statue was labeled and continues to be known as the Priest King. This is because archaeologists were familiar with Mesopotamian history and its priest kings, and have found parallels in the Indus region. But as we will see, p. 23, the ritual practices of the Harappan civilization are not well understood, yet nor are there any means of knowing whether those who performed them also held political power. Some archaeologists are of the opinion that Harappan society had no rulers, and that everybody enjoyed equal status. Others feel there was no single ruler but several, that Mohenjo-daro had a separate ruler, Harappa another, and so forth. Yet others argue that there was a single state, given the similarity in artifacts, the evidence for planned settlements, the standardized ratio of brick size, and the establishment of settlements near sources of raw. You have reached the end of the document.